cloud, right? Okay, it says it's recording.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
wow.
you. Could
Now just
everyone
bring
please
it-
make sure they're muted just so we don't have the background noise? Please. Thank you.
I like your hat, Amanda.
Thank you.
All right, is everyone ready to get into it? Yeah, okay. All right, so the workshop today is going to be on source integration. So basically just how to avoid plagiarism and how to effectively add parts from articles into your essays. So source integration is not just about the citing aspect. It's also, like I said, how you incorporate those articles and the references into your paper. And you don't want things to sound like you're just plopping it in the paper. You want it to actually make sense with what you're doing and what you're writing about. So it's important to point to the evidence and make sure that you're not just adding a random quote just to add a random quote. And you want to make sure that the sources, again, work for details that support your main idea. That's really important because, like I said, you don't want to just add random stuff. So a good way to introduce sources are by using signal phrases. So signal phrases are a phrase, clause, or sentence that introduce a quotation, paraphrase, or summary. So you can use words like argue, assert, illustrate, think, write. The author said that if you're using a direct quote. So just ways to introduce that you're going to be using a quote or summarizing something that will let them know that it's not necessarily your own thoughts. You're working on someone else's thoughts as well, incorporated with your own. And then you also want to think about the organization of your paragraphs. So you want to make sure that your sentences are sandwiched together. You're not just putting something in without explaining it before and after, or introducing it before and explaining it after. You want to, again, show the evidence and how it supports your main idea. And if you have a very long quote, you can use block quotations. I know we have resources on the Collab's website to show how to do block quotations, but definitely if you have a longer source, you want to make sure that you use block quotations. So the 4 components to source integration are summarizing, paraphrasing, direct quote, and synthesizing. So summarizing, pretty self-explanatory. You're taking a part of the article and you're putting it into your own words, but giving like the brief overall description of that part. Paraphrasing is putting 1 or 2 details from a part into your own ideas and your own words, taking the ideas from the author and the article. Direct quote is taking a direct part from the article that you are using and putting it in quotation marks and making sure you're citing it after. And again, you have to introduce it, put the quote, use a signal phrase. And then synthesizing is building connections between your own ideas and the main ideas of your paper. So you are not just explaining the quote, you're also explaining how it relates to everything else that you're writing about.
So, like Brooke said, the first 4 components are summarizing. So summarizing is when you're taking key points and ideas from the text and rephrasing it into your own words. So you would use this when you have like a really big quote and you don't want to quote it word for word. I actually just did this the other day when I was doing a speech. I had a really big quote that I didn't want to write down on my notes. So I summarized it by doing the main points of the quote. So here's an example from Brooke's literature review on psychology treatment. Unfortunately, schizophrenia is not a disorder that can be cured. However, therapy can help control and maintain it. In recent years, it has been found that psychotherapy mixed with pharmacology therapy is seemingly the most effective form of treatment. And then her summary was, while there is currently no cure for schizophrenia, there are many therapeutic methods and measures that can be used to help minimize symptoms of it. So you could see that she took the main points of that quote and put it in her own words. So the next thing is paraphrasing, which is sort of like summarizing, but it's different because you're using words from the quote. You should not take away from what the author has already said, and you do not need to use quotations in paraphrase, but you do need to provide a citation because you are taking someone else's thought and putting it into your own words, which is different than summarizing, because in summarizing, you're taking the thought and mixing it with your own words and making it your own idea. But with paraphrasing, you are taking that person's idea and just saying it without a quote. So the example is the golden retriever rescue of mid-Florida suggests that golden retrievers need to have hard, consistent exercise daily, 20 to 30 minutes twice a day, and it's usually significant. So if you wanted to paraphrase, it would be golden retrievers benefit from 20 to 30 minutes of exercise twice a day. And you wanted to make sure that you had the citation at the end because you got that information from somewhere else. And direct quotes are the quotes that you guys are probably already know. So when you do a direct quote, you want to make sure they're in quotations to avoid plagiarism, and you want to make sure that you cite it at the end. And this is the MLA citation and APA citation, because their in-text citations are different.
Sorry. This is just an example of a quote sandwich like I talked about before. So you want to introduce it. So the top piece of your bread is your introduction before adding in your quotation. So you don't want to just plop the quote. Again, you want to introduce it so people understand what you're using and why you're using it. And then the quote, you're filling in the middle part of your sandwich and then explaining. So the bottom piece of bread is explaining why the quote's important to your main idea, how it relates to your main idea, and why you're using it. So an example would be according to Plato. So that's the introduction. You're stating who it's from. Wise men talk because they have something to say, fools because they have something to say. And then, so that's a quote. And then after, you're explaining it. So Plato's point is that people should always think before they speak. This is important to remember when communicating in any situation, whether talking to parents or chatting with peers, as speaking without thinking can lead to saying something one does not mean or will regret.
The next one is synthesizing. Sorry.
Oh, I thought that was me. Sorry, you.
That's okay. So the next one is synthesizing, and this is where your own ideas come in, and it's extremely important to have a good and strong source integration for this. You build connections to your own ideas and to the main idea of your paper, and you also combine summaries from multiple sources that agree on many of the same ideas. And you want to make sure to avoid misinterpreting a source just to make it fit into your paper. So you're going to see this in literature reviews because you're comparing and contrasting the author's views and the way that they write their papers or articles. And then you're also going to see it in lab reports because you're gathering all that data that you found and you're making reason with it. And some tips for synthesizing. You want to be organized. You want to research your topic. You want to find multiple sources and you want to analyze the sources to find connections between them. Some questions to consider when you're synthesizing are, do any authors disagree with another author? Does one author extend the research of another author? Are the authors all in agreement? And does any author raise new questions or ideas about the topic? So now we're just going to go over the basic APA and MLA citations. So this is for the APA. It just gives you an example of an in-text citation. For APA, you want to use commas in between the last name, the year, and the page number. And remember to always use the punctuation at the end of the second parenthesis. And here we have just other examples of APA citations and the different kinds. So if you look closely, you can see the differences between the journal, the book, and audiovisual. It's just different italics and different ways to cite each of these. And the same thing with MLA. You see in the in-text citation, it has last name and page number with no comma.
Actually, Ashley, can you go back to the MLA and the APA? Because I feel like we went through them really, really fast.
Sure, yeah, I also have a link to the resources at the end. So all of these are on the website that you can find.
So I do more MLA than APA. So I find MLA to be easier, but it depends on your major. Like I know Nora, who's in this, is a psychology major, so she uses APA more. But so what would you describe the difference between the APA citation and the MLA citation? Because I don't really know about APA that well.
Do you mean in text or?
Either one.
So yeah, the basic difference is if you look here, it's the commas in the in-text citation. And you also need year and page number, whereas I believe in MLA, you only need the page number. Is that correct?
It depends if you used it in the sentence before or the paragraph before. If you don't mention the source, you have to put it in the citation. If you already mentioned the source, then you don't need to put it in the citation. You could just put the year or the page number.
Okay. So for APA, you use the last name. No, the first name, I think, of the author, and then it's last name, and then the initial.
Yeah, because I think that's both last name.
And then the initial of the middle name as well. For the in-text. I mean, for the reference page.
And you also want to make sure you indent the second line. Some computers or some programs make that really troubling, so sometimes you have to figure it out. So for activity, there would be a few different examples of quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing on the next slide. Let us know which one you guys think it is.
Okay, so number one, we are not makers of history, we are made by history. Does anyone want to guess which one that is? So it would either be quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing. Those are your two choices.
Quoting.
Why do you think it's that?
Because it's a direct quote with citation.
Yes. You are right, Jake.
Awesome. So the original from the article, the Golden Retriever Rescue of Mid-Florida suggests that Golden Retrievers need to have hard, consistent exercise daily. 20 to 30 minutes twice a day is usually sufficient. And then the updated would be Golden Retrievers benefit from 20 to 30 minutes of exercise twice a day.
So everyone's saying summarizing. This one isn't summarizing.
Yeah, this one's paraphrasing. Yeah,
It's
do
actually
you want to
the same quote
explain
from the paraphrasing thing.
what?
It's the same example from the paraphrasing slide.
If I can ask a question, can you guys explain the difference?
So Yeah, so the difference between paraphrasing and summarizing is that paraphrasing, you're still using like you see how in the original thing, it says for word that they need to do it twice a day, 20 to 30 minutes, right? So that's paraphrasing because you're still using word for word what they're saying. So that's, you didn't get that information from yourself. It wasn't known information, you got it from a source. So instead of putting it in a quote, you just took that information and put it out in a normal sentence. And then at the end of the sentence, it's supposed to have a citation, in-text citation. So it shows that you got the information from somewhere else. While summarizing is basically taking everything. And so basically you're summarizing the whole article or main points between what you're trying to take out of that paragraph, instead of taking direct quotes from it.
I have a question. So when you're summarizing, you don't need to add an in-text citation.
Would you be able to type your question? Sorry, you kind of sounded like an alien. And while she's typing it, the last one, of course, would be summarizing, since that's the only one left. So the American Heart Association suggests eating 3 to 4 cups of fruit and vegetables daily to maintain good heart health.
So Eve's question is, when you're summarizing, do you need to add an in-text citation?
With APA, yes. You just wouldn't you only use the page number when you are using a direct quote, but if you're summarizing or paraphrasing, you would just do it after what you're talking about, without the page number. I don't know, Gracie, if that's the same for MLA. I don't know MLA at all.
Anytime I get information, to always put it on the safe side, anytime I get information that I didn't come up by myself, I always cite it, because I don't want to get kicked out of school for plagiarism. So to be on the safe side, I always put the in-text citation at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, and you're never going to get penalized for citing a lot. You're welcome. Okay, so we are going to practice summarizing. So this is a little section from one of the articles I used, Ham ETAL 2013. So it says, as previously discussed, there is substantial evidence supporting CBT as effective in reducing symptoms, but it is not clear if these approaches adequately address other targets of treatment raised by the recovery movement, as they typically do not explicitly involve I always do a second period after the ET. Whoops. Is there supposed to be 2? No, okay. Sorry, I shouldn't have read that while I was reading. Okay, so there's not supposed to be a period after the ET. Sorry. Okay. Psychodynamic approaches, meanwhile, may enhance interpersonal functioning, but may not adequately address how a person with schizophrenia might agentically employ their knowledge of themselves and others to move towards recovery. So basically, I just want you guys to use a sentence or two and just summarize this.
What is CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, because I thought it was something totally different. I should know this because Morgan talks about this all the time.
And I do have an example. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that you could summarize, but we'll give you guys a few minutes and I have an example after of one of the ways to summarize.
Would this be better to put in the chat, or do you want us to?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
while you guys are working on this, did you guys know what the L meant? In the citation? No,
The what?
The ET L. I don't know how to say that. The ETAL. Like, do you guys know what that means?
The source had other authors or like collaborators.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure you guys knew what it was.
And I sent the actual like APA citation in the chat in case anyone wanted to read the article. And if you guys need help with anything, just let us know. You can raise your hand or type it in the chat. And when you're done, maybe just raise your hand, just so we know. But take your time.
So writing collab 2, which I think is Victoria, said the author argues that CBT can be effective treatment to reduce symptoms of schizophrenia, but psychodynamic treatment options may improve other areas CBT would not improve. However, certain aspects affected by schizophrenia may require other treatment options. So what do you guys think of that sentence of summarizing?
Anyone have thoughts? Besides Amanda?
Besides Amanda.
I'm gonna send mine. Mine is a little different because I actually understood the context of it. I know
Wait,
it's hard
before
when
you
it's
send yours, let's go over Dana's, because Dana sent
Yeah.
hers too.
Do you want me to read? Okay. CBT has been shown to reduce symptoms, but isn't sufficient to address self-experience. Psychodynamic approaches are better for interpersonal functions, but not great for self-knowledge. What do you guys think about that one?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's more difficult because we don't understand the context.
Yeah.
But I think when Victoria read but when I read Victoria's, I felt like it was more confusing because she had more of the jargon in it, while Dana's ones seems like more summarized, like it's more like I can understand it better what the actual quote is saying when Dana said it, because I don't understand the quote at all. Oh, see, so Brooke said, you want to read yours, Brooke?
Yeah. So basically the article was talking about interpersonal therapy and how it differed from cognitive behavioral therapy. So in mine, I wrote IPT varies from other treatment methods of schizophrenia as they often do not touch upon self-experience or the knowledge and skills clients already have and build from them. So kind of along the same lines, but I didn't exactly say CBT, but I talked about the self-experience and the knowledge that basically the quote is just saying that CBT doesn't. And then Nora said, there is substantial evidence supporting CBT as effective in reducing symptoms. It is not clear if these approaches adequately address other targets of treatment raised by the recovery movement. Psychodynamic approaches may enhance interpersonal functioning. So the only issue with this one, you take a lot directly from the quote. So in the future, I would just say try to use your own language and not like, if you see a word, try to think of another word for it.
And Amanda said it's often hard to differentiate between summarizing and paraphrasing. I think they are used for different purposes. You wouldn't typically summarize in a research paper, but you might in a typical response to the source. So Amanda, why don't you just speak and explain it more?
Well, I just think that they're like, in theory, they're very similar ideas. So I think that like anybody who's trying to understand the difference, it's more about like what you would use it for versus what it is. So you'd summarize something like if you have to read a paper and you have an assignment that you have to like analyze what the author's saying, you might summarize some of what they're talking about in the article. So you wouldn't necessarily, like somebody asked before, would you cite it? You wouldn't necessarily have to cite it because you're specifically talking about this one article, right? Versus when you're paraphrasing, you're taking the author's own words and not just like putting them in a different order, but kind of analyzing what they're saying but still using their evidence to prove the point of your own paper. So putting it in your own words.
I like your explanation.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then Dana asked, would you consider Nora's to be a good example of paraphrasing? What do you guys think?
I think it
Well,
will
Gracie
be.
already answered.
Oh, wait, no. What do
It's
you?
okay. No, it's okay. Explain it.
So I think it would be a good example of paraphrasing, except that sometimes she uses like direct quotes from it. So I would say like those parts would have to be in person per quotation marks. I was saying the wrong thing anyway. Quotation marks. But besides that, like it is a better example of paraphrasing.
Does anybody else want to share? Or do you want to move on to the next one? Okay, go on to the next one. Wait, can you go back one slide? Perfect. So this one will be paraphrasing. So the quote is, I'll put it in the chat too. Howard Zinn conveys to his students his strong convictions that no one has the right to oppress another under any circumstances. I made clear my abhorrence of any kind of bullying, whether by powerful nations over weaker ones, governments over their citizens, employers over employees, or by anyone on the right or left who thinks they may have a monopoly on the truth. And again, this can be done in a sentence or two. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate.
Well, and would you guys want to talk out loud instead of doing it in the thing, so we could just discuss your ideas of how you would paraphrase it?
I like that. Anyone besides tutors want to step in?
I'll start calling people.
Well, give people a second to read it, because if you're
Yeah.
not familiar with this kind of
No, I am.
language.
I'm just gonna pick my victim with after a while.
I can go first.
Who said that?
Leslie.
Oh, Nora.
Leslie.
Oh, Leslie.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Howard Zinn says that no group has the power. No group should oppress another group just because they think they know what they think is right. What I said
Yeah.
that backwards. Yeah.
Well, I get what you were trying to say.
Yeah.
Luke asks, would you leave the quote as it is and then paraphrase the intro? It actually depends on what you're trying to do. If you, I'm just thinking on how I would do that if I wanted to do it like that. Was like because the quote is from, I'm talking too much.
Can I say something?
Yes.
So essentially, like if you're doing APA formatting, the whole difference between paraphrasing and using direct quotes and just citing is that paraphrasing, you don't really want to have a direct quote in there. So that's kind of the difference between the two. So if you were doing like an MLA paper, you could use this, but it wouldn't be considered paraphrasing. It would be just considered citing the source directly. But if you wanted to, like an APA, typically you're not going to put very many, if any, direct quotes in, unless it's like something that is very, very specific that you really can't, if you were to kind of paraphrase it, you would change the meaning of it. So that's really the only time you want to use direct quotes in APA. So for MLA, you can do that, which you, like you said, I would probably change the first, like that's kind of your signal phrase right there, which Brooke talked about earlier. So you would kind of change that part, reword it, and then you could do that, but you would be quoting it instead of paraphrasing it. Does that kind of answer the question there?
I also was thinking, that sometimes when I have a big quote, or like I want to use a certain half, that I just paraphrase the beginning half, and then sometimes I do direct quotes in the same sentence too. So it is possible to do both, but I don't think it will count as paraphrasing or count as two different things.
And I know these are hard because like you don't have context and the wording, there's a lot of words. But I figured having something that's a little intensive where we can talk about it might be a little better for learning purposes, just because the reality is articles aren't easy to read. Especially like for me being in psychology, I don't really know about other majors too much, but I know like our stuff, it's so content heavy and like each sentence has so many words. So I figured it'd be easier to just kind of work it out. But yeah, that's why these are like pretty difficult, just because I wanted to be more realistic. So we had the opportunity to talk about it.
It's a good example too, Brooke, because that's kind of the point, right? Is when you're doing paraphrasing, you don't just want to reword what the author is saying. You want to like make sure you know what they're talking about. Like maybe not everybody knows what the word abhorrence means, right? So go and look it up and see, so that way, when you're handing in your own work, you can prove that I know what this means. It's not just me kind of recycling somebody else's information.
Do you know what abhorrence means?
Yeah, it's like a synonym for hatred, kind of.
Does anyone else have any ideas or anything they want to share?
I have a thought.
Yeah.
Sorry for the feedback. Are you muted?
You're good.
Okay. Hannah has her sound on, so it was doing a weird noise. But if I was to paraphrase this, I don't know if this is right or not. You guys could let me know. I would say like Howard Zinn makes his dislike of oppression clear, whether it be by nations, governments, employers, or anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And again, it's hard because we don't really know the context of it, but I think that explained it and was like a good paraphrase.
I like that sentence.
All right, so I'm gonna send the one I came up with if no one else has any other ideas or anyone else wants to share before I send it.
You can read yours out loud though if you want. Instead of
Yeah, I'll read it out loud. So the one I came up with, it's pretty simplified. Zinn shares his support of equality for all people and his anti-oppression viewpoints with his students. So
Wouldn't
very
that be
simple.
more of a summary than a paraphrase though?
I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the context of like what you're writing about.
Because where in a quote does it say he talks to his students?
That's true. I read more into it again.
So I think.
Oh no, he
that's
does. Howard Zinn
point,
conveys to his
Gracie.
students
Um,
in the first couple
I
words.
don't know if you guys can hear me.
Wait, what'd
maybe.
you say, Dr. Anderson?
So I said, I think that that's a really good point that you brought up, like the difference between summary and paraphrasing here. But Brooke, I think that that's a good point, that it really depends on the context you're using it in your paper, right?
Mhm.
That could go either way. It just kind of depends on what that sentence is surrounded by.
Oh, and it does say students. I'm sorry, Brooke.
Fine. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna send this again. I sent it in the beginning, but
Well, actually, while Brooke is doing that, you want to stop sharing the screen, and then if you guys have any more questions, we can go over them.
Yeah, and I'm also gonna send the links to resources
oh,
that
I did it.
are from the collab. You did it already?
I did it. Yeah.
Okay.
So in the chat, I sent it again. There's some resources from the Collab's website and a bunch of other resources. If you guys haven't looked at them, I use them all the time because, you know, sometimes things just slip your mind and you're like working on a paper and you're like, wait, how do I do this? So there's the resources to this workshop as well as just everything else from APA to like literally everything. And then also, everyone that's here, only a few people filled out the form. I know I sent it like in the middle of us talking. So if you could just take like a minute or two and just fill out the form, just to let us know that you attended.
But do you guys have any other questions? Oh, you're welcome, Kane.
That was so sweet.
I have a question.
Yes.
So as somebody who, like, I know Brooke's more of APA like I am. So actually, I'm not sure what if you're more APA or MLA. Grace, I know you're MLA. Would you guys think that, like, as somebody who doesn't really use direct quotes that much, how important is it to have extra context, like on either side of your quotation, to make sure you kind of understand it, rather than just like throwing the quote in there and like kind of letting the author speak for themselves? How important is that?
Okay, it's very, very important that you always explain your quote, either before or after. Your quote is, even if it's paraphrasing or a direct quote, it's just your evidence to back up what you're saying. And it can't be just enough to put that quote there. So say if you just put a quote in the middle of the paper and then you don't explain the quote. Why is the quote there? What was the purpose of please reading that quote? So that's why it's important to do it before or after or both.
I have a question.
Yes,
So
Nova.
what would you say about doing a double quotation in a direct quotes? Or
Okay, so I do this sometimes. Are you talking about like using two sentences or using two different quotes? Or
Are you
both?
talking about how when you have a direct quote, so like that is the last example, how that technically the whole paragraph was a quote, but he had his own quotation marks in it?
yes.
So are you talking about like how would you quote, like if you want to quote the whole paragraph, how would you quote both?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm not familiar with MLA, but I think it's pretty similar. You would do QTD dot in, and then I believe for APA it's it's like the author's name, like the regular citation. You would just do QTD in.
Wait,
Is it the same? It would, okay, so. I just did the example from before, the first one. And then MLA, I think you would do QTD in and then the article. If I remember correctly.
Yes, just
Yeah,
that's a quote within a
quote.
quote. Because what I usually do, I don't know if this is right, because I always get confused with this, but what I usually do when there's a quote in a quote, I just do it how I usually do my direct quotes. I just copy and paste out directly from the thing, and make sure the whole quote is in quotation marks, even if there's a double quotation marks in the middle of the whole thing with quotation marks.
When you're quoting a quote, you wouldn't do actual quotation marks. You would in the beginning and the end, but when you're using the actual quote that's in the quote, you would use the apostrophe. I guess, yeah, the apostrophe. No. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just one quotation.
My paraphrasing is easier, so just avoid that whole problem and just paraphrase it.
Yeah. Yes, the recording will be available. And then, yeah, so exactly like Dana put in.
Oh, see, I've been doing, oh, I meant that, I sent that to just Dr. Anderson. Hold on. See, I've been doing it wrong because I've been doing it like this and no one ever said anything to me.
I feel like a lot of people don't like, especially professors, I feel like they don't know typically like the quoted in. So I feel like that's probably why they don't, except for English professors, of course.
No, I did this with English professors. They never said anything.
Still good to learn how to do it the right way though, regardless. It's helpful.
Yeah, so the way Dana did it is the right way. And now don't do it my way. Don't do it my way.
So Nora, did that answer your question or do you, oh, sorry, you're talking to Dr. Anderson.
Nora, did that answer your
Who's talking to
question?
Dr. Anderson?
Well, now she's done talking to Dr. Anderson.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions?
Most of you are in the, wait, never mind.
Okay, so are there any questions at all? You can chat it. You can always chat it like a direct message if you feel uncomfortable. Whatever works. Or we're available, I think. I mean, you can just look us up by email. We can answer questions. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's it. So
All right. Well, just make sure you fill out the form again and
if you're in a tutor training course, can you please stay after?
all right, you guys are free to go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming. I hope it was informative and you guys learned something. Again, reach out if you have any questions. Yeah, you guys did a really great job. Thank you for participating.
Amanda, you stay too. And Victoria.
I'm saying.
Thank you.
So this is, oh, you're welcome. All right, so is this everyone from the tutor training course? Okay, so do you guys have any questions about workshops or how to run it or any questions about that? Go ahead, Dana.
Okay, am I good to talk? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me because the sound is off.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
wait,
thank
Gracie,
you.
do you want to stop the
So it
recording?
seems really like relaxed. Is that normal? Is that how they usually